Hello and welcome to the Brave Hearts, Bold Minds podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. I'm Lee Hatcher. Thanks for joining me on this journey into how to help the boys of today grow into the fine young men of tomorrow. Each week I'll be interviewing an educator from the Scots College in Sydney to uncover very practical tools with which parents of school-age boys can engage, encourage and challenge their sons for wisdom and compassion. So let's ring the bell and meet our guest for this week's podcast. With me today is Phil Cooney, who's in charge of operations and student management at the Scots College, who says boys need consistency. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, Lee. Pleasure to be here, mate.
Great to meet you. Let's start off with a definition, Phil. How would you explain consistency?
From a theoretical perspective, I'd say that when we're talking about consistency and we're talking about boys' education and management, I see it as the implementation of effort and structure with minimal variation.
Okay. In this day and age, consistency might seem boring, repetitive, mundane. What about spontaneity, Phil? What about creativity, living in the moment?
Yeah, I don't discount any of that, Lee, but what I've learnt over, 20 plus years managing adolescent behaviour is that boys crave consistency, they crave structure, they want to know the boundaries. What I have found is boys don't operate in the grey. They work best black and white, where they have a known outcome and they know exactly how they're going to get there.
Do they realise this about themselves? Do they realise grey zones are a struggle?
No, I don't believe they do. And this is where us as educators and importantly as parents, we need to understand that it's our job to be giving them that structure. It's all too easy, Lee, to sit back and be passive in our teaching and be passive in our parenting, expecting that boys are going to understand what they need to do. I see our job very much as giving them that structure, giving them those parameters and boundaries that they know they can work within in a positive way, but it keeps them moving forward.
Talk to me about the role of conflict in this process, because you're saying that conflict's not always that bad.
No, I found over my time, given my history in the boarding environment, is that I found dealing a lot with parents that they saw conflict as within the home as always being negative. And quite often I get boys given to me in boarding and they'd say, Phil, we need you to sort him out because we've got too much conflict at home. And my reason in looking at this is that not all conflict has to be negative, that sometimes I refer to you can have, as long as it's controlled, you can have positive conflict to enable positive change. And sometimes you need that to keep boys moving in an appropriate direction.
But you don't go out of your way to instill that or
no, you don't go looking for it.
No.
But neither do, when that moment arrives, do you necessarily retreat from it. I see these days quite often, I see passive parenting where parents want to be 24/7, be their boy's best mate, be on side, doing all the fun things. But I find parenting, now particularly from a personal point of view, is parenting is a job, it's a task, it's a responsibility. And with that sometimes comes things that you've got to take on that might not be pleasant, they might not be the fun things, but that's part of the job, reinforcing those boundaries, the consistent message of what you deem to be appropriate and acceptable and what outcome you want for your son at the end.
Because it's very much easier to let it go.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
We all get tired at times, and I certainly know that, and both within the teaching framework and the home environment. Sometimes it's easy just to walk away, pull the bed covers over your head and let it, just let it roll.
I've done that.
And it's certainly I've done that. But I'm a firm believer in sometimes, you've got to take it on and for want of a better expression, you've got to fight the fight.
Yeah.
If you're really looking to parent your son, sometimes you've got to take that confrontation head on to ensure that they're learning. And it doesn't have to be, I stress these days that it doesn't have to be punitive. It's not about punishment. It's about those defining moments where they actually learn through their behaviour that perhaps what they haven't done isn't appropriate, and they learn from that, and hopefully next time they think a little bit more before they act.
But you pick your battles.
You definitely pick your battles. Okay. Not everything's worth fighting at the end of the day, and you need that flexibility and wisdom that sometimes comes with a little bit of experience to understand at times there are things that due to circumstance, certain externalities, there might be a situation you just got to walk away from, accept what is, and take to it on another day.
So you talk about experience. From the wealth of your experience, especially here, how am I as a parent going to pick the battles? What's the wisdom there?
I say don't sweat the small things. Okay. There's going to be times where it's the small things that irritate you, untidy room, perhaps they haven't done their homework. Sometimes they're the ones that perhaps you've got to let go to win the bigger battles. There's reasons for it, and sometimes you have to be willing to listen to those reasons, understand, discuss, and move on. But making a mountain out of a molehill is certainly not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, let's get practical. Can you give us some examples of activities or perhaps approaches that might enable boys to have a more consistent and also maybe a more disciplined approach to both education and life?
Look, anything, that found within the academic, the sport realm or co-curricular, a lot of the programs we run here, they offer that structure as part of the delivery of the program. So that structure is there. The boys learn to operate within that. They know where they are. They know the steps going forward. They know what the end game is going to be. They know where the boundaries are. They know consequence for overstepping the boundaries. And that's implied to them, it's taught to them. It's then lessons that they can take away into a wider environment and apply where perhaps those structures aren't formal and where those hierarchies don't exist.
All seems very simple and ordered and consistent to me. So is that the way it plays out in practice?
Perception versus reality, Lee, two different things.
But it's a point to make, okay, this is good in theory.
Great in theory, but I play an 80% game. So
that's interesting.
As long as you are trying your best to adhere to a consistent, firm but fair type approach, there's going to be times that you don't always win, and there's going to be times where there's chaos. But stick to your guns, all right? And, as I've seen over a long time here, boys do reach their destination.
The range of activities here and indeed interests and activities outside of school, what are the sort of activities that are going to be aiding more a consistent approach to life and discipline?
Once again, anything that gives them that structure, anything that has certain rules, obligations, responsibilities attached to it.
What's the range of stuff?
Look, I see great outcomes here from boys operating, everywhere from the diversity of a structured classroom environment with clear boundaries to sports programs, the discipline involved in playing and achieving at a high level in sport. Well, not just a high level, but any level at their personal capacity through to our co-curricular programs where, here we have, our Army Cadet program, which is based on clear structure, hierarchy, the pipes and drums, the music program, all which encourage through clear expectation, through defined boundaries, application, commitment, ongoing focus and purpose in these activities keeps the boys moving forward. They learn these disciplines under the guise of these programs. As I alluded to earlier, they can then equally be transferred to other areas of their wider operation.
Discipline is not consistency, but it's a critical part of it. How are you going to instill in a boy a greater sense of discipline? How do you do that?
Through experience, and it's showing the boys discipline is something that can't be punitive. It can't be always punishment.
As it has been in the past.
It has been in the past, certainly. I worked one of my early days here. I worked with staff who could record fondly the wielding of the cane.
Oh yeah, how fond those days
and
were.
The outcomes that achieved. We've moved past that, and these days it's really about education. If you're really looking at instilling, a sense of self-discipline within a young man, you have to demonstrate that yourself, and that's where role modelling and positive mentoring is so important. But also you've got to show him what is the outcome of that. If you are self-disciplined and you are ordered and you're focused and you're committed, where is the end game for that? Where is that going to take you?
What's the destination?
What's the destination?
To be frank, what's the payoff for me? And there can be a big payoff.
Yeah, so we're always, in all these lessons that we try and instill in the boys and these skills, we always try and give them real-world application. Sure, it has benefits for what they do within range of activities at the college here, but what we try and instill is what we're giving them, this sense of self-discipline, sense of purpose and working within boundaries is that these are real-world skills that they can take and will have significant application and give them a solid foundation post the illustrious walls of this college.
Yes. But again, returning to your earlier point about the effort that's required not only at school but at home with parents as well, your experience as the head of one of the boarding houses has informed this, and the kind of difference that some people see between your role here, Mr. Nasty, and they want to be their mate at home.
Yeah, Mr. Nasty's an interesting one. I've been called that. I've also been called devil, the devil in kind, where parents...
I didn't mean that personally.
No. I don't take it personally. I always found it interesting that I did deal with parents who would see boarding and the structures and the consistency that we applied in boarding as being a fix-it. And it was a bit like, they'd call in a plumber to fix their tap, electrician to fix their wiring. They'd call in our boarding skills to fix their son. It stressed to them that it really was a tripartite relationship that we needed to get their boy moving forward.
Yes.
We could give them structure and consistency within the boarding realm. We could instill those skills, but they had to reinforce them. It was home. It was no use me doing, or our team doing the hard yards during the week, and then they go home and the parent thinks, well, the boarding staff have got him to do his homework, he's organised, he's tidy.
Just relax him a bit.
Now he comes home on the weekend and I can be his best mate, and I can relax those boundaries. And I go back to what I originally said, is that boys don't operate in the grey.
The grey zone. Yeah.
They don't operate in that grey zone.
You favour a consistent and negotiated approach to the development of young men. So how can you balance those two elements, a negotiated consistency?
As I think we alluded to, it's picking your battles.
Yeah.
It's coming back to looking at what's in front of you, what outcome are you looking at, keeping your mind on that final destination for that fine young man standing in front of you, and sometimes actually saying, is this worth the fight, or can I take a slightly different track to achieve the same outcome?
Have you got a story of one boy in particular for whom this consistency, perhaps for the first time, was somewhat transformative in his life?
I guess, yes. In the various roles I've done here, I've been privileged to work with hundreds of boys and see their development as they've gone through the college. A lot stick in my memory, but there was one boy in particular who was part of our cadet program, and at year 10, his worlds, personally, academically, sporting, family, were collapsing, and he was failing. He was in trouble. He was floundering, couldn't see purpose, and we identified that sometimes boys just need a bit of responsibility. And with that comes a little bit of purpose. So we carved him out a bit of a niche role within the cadet unit, and without sort of going on for too long, all of a sudden he found that having that bit of responsibility, having that little bit of leadership and accountability, he found his purpose. And to this day, it sticks in my mind as being, it really was transformational, from the floundering boy in year 10 to the fine young man who I saw graduate at year 12, proud of his uniform, proud of what he'd achieved, his sporting endeavours, his academic program had turned around, and he left a real positive legacy at the college. And there's certain moments that will always stick with you, as an educationalist, and I think that very much was at the final annual cadet dinner that we host each year, and his mother came up, and in parting comments she turned to me and said, "Phil, look, he was in absolute disarray in year 10, but I want to thank you." And she took my hand and shook it, and she said, "You saved my son."
Oh.
And
what a moment.
It was it's those moments. It's and that's not something you can quantify in dollar terms, Lee.
No. What a privilege to be involved in that process, in the development of a fine young man.
Certainly. Working in a field like this, we're privileged to have those rewards.
Phil Cooney, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Not a problem.
Great conversation. If you'd like more information about growing your boy into a fine young man, you can subscribe to receive useful articles and news from the Scots College. It's free and offered to every parent who wants the very best for their boy in their journey to manhood. In your internet search engine, enter the Scots College e-newsletter to subscribe. I'm Lee Hatcher. Hope you'll join me again next week on Brave Hearts, Bold Minds, our podcast, Growing Fine Young Men. So, Phil, your turn to ring us out.
Where's the bell, mate?
Here it is. Right there.
Oh, got it. Cheers, mate.